Susan put a message in the chat, but if you're just joining in, feel free to drop your name, your organization, and where you're from in the chat so we get to know everybody a little bit. And we'll get started here in the next minute or so. I just know. Okay, everybody, thanks again for joining. And again, happy National Runaway Prevention Month. We're going to go ahead and get started and just be mindful of time. We've got a big conversation to pack in this hour. My name is Sam Gillis. I'm the Chief Program Officer with the National Runaway Safe Line. I'm very fortunate to be joined here today by 3 youth serving providers who will be our panelists for the main portion of this event. We have Amy Boyd. She is an anti-trafficking supervisor from YouthWorks in North Dakota. Amy, if you could give a little wave. We have Josh Crocker from the Pendleton Place in South Carolina. Josh is their Youth Resource Director. And then we have Doug Mowry, Senior Director of Residential Programs at Ignite in Chicago, Illinois. And if Josh and Doug, if you didn't give a little wave, if you could do that. They're going to give you a brief overview of their programs later, right before we jump into the roundtable discussion. But before we get started, I wanted to also take a moment to acknowledge some other NRS staff in the room. We have Susan Frankel, our CEO. Susan, can you give a little pageant wave as well? Thank you. We have the incredible Christopher Smith here, our graphic design and communications manager. Christopher is responsible for all of our awesome graphics and is the mastermind behind all of our revitalized social media. We have Sam Mority here, recently joined as our new digital media and communications coordinator. I don't know if we have Em in the room yet, but they might be joining soon. Em is our prevention and youth engagement coordinator. And then I know we have Jess Serta, our director of crisis services here. And if I'm forgetting anyone, I'm very sorry, but we've got an incredible team here. And if you give a little wave, that will let folks know that you're with NRS. And then I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge, I see at least one FISB name in here. So thank you to FISB for being in the proverbial room here as well. And thank you for our partnership. Anna Cody's our program officer. I don't know if she's on the line yet, but thank you to Anna if she joins soon. So jumping right in, for the first part of the event today, I'll be providing a quick overview of NRPM and sharing some of the national data and trends that we saw from crisis contacts reaching out to the Safe Line in 2021. I'll also be sharing some trends that we saw emerge between 2019 and 2021. And then from there, we're going to transition over into that roundtable discussion with our panelists to have a conversation about what they're seeing in their programs and communities as it relates to mental health and how they're responding. Then we'll leave about 10 minutes or so towards the end for Q&A. Please feel free to pose your questions in the chat and we'll collect them during the course of the presentation. But if you prefer to wait and verbally ask your questions during the Q&A, that is totally fine and up to you. But we'll be handling all of those towards the end. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Christopher, can you jump to the next slide, please? So as you all know by now, and by joining this call, November is National Runaway Prevention Month, or NRPM as we call it. And it's a public awareness campaign focused on shining a light on the experiences of youth who have left home due to family conflict or other crisis, or experiencing homelessness or housing instability. It's also an opportunity for us to spotlight resources available to support youth and to empower communities to take action. So I want to take a moment here to share our newest NRPM video and to just ground us in the importance of this month and really more broadly this work for our discussion today.
There are approximately 4.2 million young people living in the streets, in shelters, or couch surfing each year.
Youth experiencing homelessness face dangers on the streets and may have difficulty finding food, accessing healthcare, and remaining in school.
Youth homelessness is a very real problem affecting both urban and rural communities across America. About 1 in 30 teens between the ages of 13 and 17 experience homelessness each year.
These are classmates, friends, and other young people who
between the ages of 13 and 17 experience homelessness each year.
These are classmates, friends, and other young people who may not have a safe place to go at the end of the school day.
It is critical that we work to prevent and ultimately end runaway incidents and youth homelessness.
One way to support young people is by joining National Runaway Prevention Month, or NRPM. Every November, the National Runaway Safe Line leads this important public awareness campaign to shine a light on the issues facing youth who have left home due to family conflict or other crisis, or have experienced homelessness or housing instability. It also is an opportunity to spotlight resources available to support youth and young adults and to empower communities to take action.
NRPM is successful because of the incredible community of partner organizations who participate in the campaign. Partner organizations and youth ambassadors from across the country are helping to spread the word and shine a light in their local communities about the issues facing young people who have run away or are experiencing homelessness, and the critical importance of prevention and the prevention work that we highlight during NRPM.
Partners share information and data on social media, host special events, engage local governments to issue proclamations, and light buildings in green, the color of NRPM, and so much more.
Join us as a National Runaway Prevention Month partner. NRS provides support and resources and invites partners to participate in several national events, such as the Twitter chat, Wear Green Day, and Project Green Light.
Together, we can help young people reach their full potential and enjoy fulfilling lives.
For more information and to register as a partner, visit 1-800-runaway.org/NRPM.
Thanks, Christopher. So it's super easy to get involved with NRPM, as you heard, and you all are already doing so by joining us here today. You can share posts on social media, Wear Green on Wear Green Day. That's coming up this Thursday on November 10th. We're going to look for all of your pictures. and host special events or engage your local governments, as the video stated. NRS also has a youth ambassador program that we work really closely with during NRPM, and you all also have the opportunity to get more young people involved to spread the word through this program. More information about NRPM events, the Youth Ambassador Program, and our partner and Youth Ambassador toolkits that you can see images of right here are available on our website at 1-800-runaway.org/NRPM. You can also register there as an NRPM partner if you have not done so already. Can you jump to the next slide, please? So for those of you that are less familiar with the National Runaway Safe Line, I just want to do a really quick overview. We are here to serve youth that have run away, that are experiencing homelessness or facing crisis, so we can ensure that they are safe and off the street. We operate the federally designated national communication system for youth experiencing crisis that have run away or that are considering leaving home or experiencing homelessness. And each year we make over 125,000 connections to offer help either through our hotline, our online resources, or our offline resources. Next slide, please. So the 24/7 hotline I spoke of is for young people in crisis. And they might be experiencing homelessness or they might not be, but really our aim is to prevent that. We can work with young people or their families or really anyone seeking support on behalf of a young person in those circumstances to provide information, resources, and trauma-informed, non-sectarian, solutions-focused crisis intervention and support. The top line is toll-free and confidential. You can reach out through phone, through our live chat service. We have an email, and then we also have a forum on our website. We have a database of over 6,500 agencies across the country that can provide support to young people, ranging from things like youth shelters to mental health services or substance use treatment centers, to food banks, to legal aid. Really anything that a young person might need in their situation, if there is a resource in an area, we would be able to refer them to that resource or help them get in contact with it. We also have programs aimed at helping reestablish lines of communication between young people and their families, such as our message service, a conference call service intended to help build more open communication and take steps towards resolving conflict between a young person and their family, as well as a family reunification and transportation program that we operate in partnership with Greyhound that can provide young people that have left home with a free bus ticket back to their home or to a safe alternative living arrangement that we would approve. We also have a variety of educational and outreach materials available on our website, including our 14-module Let's Talk Runaway Prevention curriculum that can be implemented as a whole 14-module program, or sort of this a la carte module by module program that you can implement in schools or in a variety of after school or community programs. Also on our website, we have NRS's blog and our links to our Let's Talk podcast. So again, that's 1-800-runaway.org where you can find those. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to jump into some of our data. So over the last 3 years, NRS has been really fortunate to be able to partner with Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago to analyze all of the data that is coming in through the National Communication System or through that hotline. Really what we are analyzing is who's reaching out, their demographics, reasons for reaching out, method of outreach, all of that kind of stuff, and making sense of it. So this year in 2022, we are analyzing the data from 2021 and pulling out all of the trends or patterns that we're seeing. This is a really valuable tool for us because it gives us a national overview of kind of what's going on with youth in crisis or youth that are considering running away or experiencing homelessness. It's also a really valuable learning tool for you all in your programs to use to either justify programs, get additional funding, or just kind of make sense of what's going on in your local community. Since we've been doing this report now for 3 years, we've got a really good lens of how these trends or how these patterns are changing over time. So I'm going to be going over some of that as well. Just a little, I think this slide it's kind of boring data stuff, but it's really important to help give you context for kind of how we break down the report and what kind of information we're getting. So I just want to be very clear that all of the data that we collect is voluntarily reported by the crisis contacts that reach out to us. So if we're looking at 2021, there were 35,601 contacts, or I'm sorry, 35,601 contacts that were reaching out to the hotline or through chat, through email, or from forums. So all of our mediums coming in for youth that are age 21 and younger. For just kind of data quality reasons, we excluded a number of those to come down to the number of 35,406 contacts. So that is the base number that we're working with and pulling out all of this analysis. And again, like I mentioned before, it's who's contacting us, how did they reach out, what are they contacting us about, how could we help, where do we refer them, and kind of what trends and patterns did we see happen this year or last year, 2021, and then over that span of time where we've been doing this analysis, so from 2019 to 2021. Okay, so this is our demographic slide. So you can see under age, gender, and race, that is the total number of contacts that we're working with here. So of the 35,000 plus, a little over 23,000 reported their age to us. That grouping of 15 to 17 is generally year after year. The biggest bucket, if you will, of contacts that reach out to us are in that age group. So that was right under 10,000 contacts. We are seeing, that I'll get into more information in a little bit, we are seeing this age group of 12 to 14 and under 12 increase higher than it has in past years. And then when you pop over to gender here, you're seeing that 66% of the contacts that reached out to us that provided their gender identified as female, and 23% identified as male, while as 10% identified as transgender or non-binary. And then looking at the race graphic here, you see that 46% of contacts that provided their race reported that they were white or Caucasian, followed by 25% identifying as Black or African American, and 16% as Hispanic or Latinx. One really interesting point to note here is that in 2021, this was the first year that we actually saw the white Caucasian bucket not being the majority. So all of the other races and ethnicities are identifying as, you put those together and that is more than 50%, and that's the first time that's happened. Next slide, please. In 2021, again, out of the 35,000 contacts that we had, a little over 23,000 reported kind of the main issue that they were having. We call them presenting issues here. And one important thing to note is that you can identify multiple, but this is the top four categories or top four issues that crisis contacts cited as the reason for their outreach. So family dynamics is 85%. That's pretty consistent year after year. That is a big bucket that can encompass things like not getting along with a family member at home, there being a divorce, having rules that like disagreements with rules at home. Really, it's a big collection bucket of anything like really family related. And then verbal and emotional abuse was actually cited as the second most presenting issue. That again is quite common and consistent year after year. It's at 32% this year. And then mental health was cited as the third most prevalent reason that crisis contacts were reaching out, and that's at 28%, followed by peer and social issues at 24%. The mental health issue I want to stress is it's our top three. It has been within the top four the last year or so, but prior to that, it really in the last couple of decades, it hasn't even reached the top 10. So it is very top of mind and something we're paying close attention to clearly, and we're here to talk about it today. Okay, so these next couple of slides are some trends I just want to share from 2019 to 2021. So previously what I shared, this was just 2021 data. Now we're talking about 2019 to 2021. So crisis contacts under the age of 15 have increased by 53% over that 3-year period. This is a really concerning trend that we're seeing for a variety of reasons. Like I said before, that biggest bucket that usually reach out to us is age 15 to 17. So younger contacts reaching out could mean a lot of things, but it could mean increased awareness. It could mean increased problems at a younger age, but really one important thing, whatever the cause may be, we can't really infer always, but whatever the cause may be, it means that we are interacting with young people sooner. And it could mean that they have, we have to pay attention to kind of like the lag time of what that means for us. Are they going to have increased issues by the time that they reach that 15 to 17 bucket? Or is this an opportunity for greater prevention? I'll get into more of the reasons and what we're doing in a little bit here. Of that, so that was contacts under the age of 15 of that kind of sub bucket. So this is contacts under the age of 12. We have seen those numbers go up by 153%. So you can see here in 2019 that there was 284 contacts that reached out under 12. And then in 2021, that jumped up to 718 contacts. Okay, as it relates to mental health, there were 4,690 contacts that reached out in 2019, citing that as a presenting issue. And then by 2021, that went up to 6,554. So a 40% increase, again, over those 3 years. Okay, might need to click, yep. So this is just a breakdown of kind of some of the specific mental health sub issues that are being cited. Oh, can you go back to within our mental health data? So of the mental health bucket, we are seeing that 57% of contacts cited depression as being the reason for why they're reaching out. 36% cited a psychological or behavioral issue generally. And then what's super alarming here is that 25% of contacts reported being suicidal, whether that is active suicidality, whether that is suicidal thoughts or making a threat. And then within that, 9% stated that they have made a prior suicide attempt. And then 11% indicated some form of self-injury. When we get those kind of contacts reaching out to us, there's a lot of options and there's a lot of assessment that goes into it. But these options listed here on the right-hand side are kind of what came of the conversation or what was posed as a possible solution during that crisis contact. So connecting a young person with a family member, a friend, some required law enforcement intervention, referrals to other supports or self-help lines. Some mandated reporting also came of that, referrals to mental health professionals or alternative youth housing. Okay. And I'm going to quickly go through this to make sure that we have enough time to conduct a robust conversation with our panelists here. But NRS is really focused on what this means. What do we do next? How do we respond to these trends and challenges? So we have a youth advisory board here that we are continuing to center at in front of all of the things that we do. So really ensuring that our priorities are are in line with the priorities of young people. So bringing this kind of information to them and then saying, you know, guys, what do we do? What do you think we should do? What makes the most sense? What is the most salient issue to you? How do we reach young people more effectively? We are also providing additional training for crisis service staff and volunteers to support contacts under the age of 15 and making sure that we are responding to them in a developmentally appropriate way, right? So you saw that increase of young people reaching out. The way we talk to a 17-year-old can't be the same as how we would talk to a 10-year-old. So really trying to reconcile what we do there. Next slide, please. And then we are also focusing on the needs, the presenting issues that are coming out of the data. So the increase in mental health, really making sure that we are including more programs in our resource database to reflect the mental health need, and as well as tools or referrals for younger age groups. And then we're also updating our Let's Talk Runaway Prevention curriculum to more effectively reach youth from a broad spectrum of audiences and really expanding it to be more user-friendly, to reach multiple age groups, and to make sure that we're focusing on the issues, the presenting issues in the ways that we need to now. And then also revamping our social media to make sure that we are reaching young people in the places and spaces that they are in ways that will resonate with them. So I could jump in, I could do a whole presentation on that, but I want to make sure we get our speakers to talk here. So I'm going to jump over here to our roundtable discussion. Amy, I think you are up first. Do you want to give, next slide, please, Christopher? Amy, can you do a brief overview of who you are and your organization?
Yeah, I sure can. So my name is Amy Boyd. I'm a licensed social worker, and I am the, actually at this point, the program manager for the Anti-Trafficking and Victims of Crime Act programs at YouthWorks. YouthWorks is the only runaway and homeless youth agency in North Dakota. We've been in existence since 1986, and we have provided anti-trafficking services since 2015 when North Dakota revamped their human trafficking law. We have offices throughout the state of North Dakota, and we cover all of North Dakota. So North Dakota is not particularly population dense, but it is large geographically, and so we do a lot of travel. We have counselors, social workers, youth engagement specialists, mentors, and our mission, it used to be a really complicated, long, fancy sounding mission, and we just revamped it to be really simple, which is that we help ensure that all youth have a safe place to belong and to be heard, which we're sort of simple, right? And pretty informal. So that's us.
Awesome, thank you. Josh, do you want to give an overview of Pendleton Place?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Josh Crocker. I am the Youth Resource Center Director at Pendleton Place. So we have a long history in child welfare services. So we were founded in 1975 as an emergency placement for youth entering into foster care, birth through 18. And since then, as I'm sure any service provider could probably relate, we have adapted and ebbed and flowed as legislation has changed and funding has changed. And so the short version is we have expanded services and adapted services quite a bit since then. So the story of how my program in particular came to be is we conducted a community needs assessment back in 2017, 2018, which identified a gap in services for youth exiting foster care, and even more broadly speaking, youth experiencing or risk of homelessness in that kind of older youth and transition youth age range, as about a third of the youth that we've seen in the foster care system are at risk for entering into the homeless system. And so we started the groundwork of opening initially what was just a drop-in center and have expanded since then. And so our range of services now include, beyond just my program, foster care entry assessments, family strengthening services, which include mediation and kinship care support groups, residential care for foster teens. So we still have that child welfare route service and part of our service array today. We also have a foster care alumni cottage for folks who have graduated and aged out of that initial foster care home. We have an emergency youth shelter for youth experiencing homelessness, and then our youth resource center, where I supervise a team of folks who provide basic needs, street outreach, case management, and a range of housing supports. So our services for youth and transition age youth in particular range from 12 to 24 years old, depending on the program and the type of services.
Awesome, thanks, Josh. And then Doug, you're up.
Great, thanks, Sam. Hello, everybody. My name is Doug Mowry. I am a licensed clinical social worker here in the state of Illinois, and I am the Senior Director of Residential Programs here with Ignite. So who is Ignite? We are a nonprofit in the city of Chicago, founded in 1976. We serve roughly 400 to 450 youth a year, ages 14 all the way up to 26 in our various programs. Mainly our youth come from the city of Chicago, but we serve anybody that finds us here on the south side. So we are located in our Bronzeville neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. We do have two main service sites, Belfort House, which is our transitional home. It houses both our adult transitional for 18 to 24, as well as our minor shelter for 14 to 17-year-olds. Then we have our community hub, which is our drop-in resource center. It also houses our street outreach and our community housing team. So we do have multiple programs here in Chicago, including our congregate transitional living facility, independent housing, as well as emergency shelter for minors. And we do operate a 24/7 crisis line as well, which can be found right there. So our main goal is to work with any young person who's experiencing housing instability in the city of Chicago. We work with them through case management services at all of our sites and all of our levels. We hope to be the last program they need.
Thank you. That's really helpful context to help ground us in the different perspectives that you all are coming from in your organization. So I'm going to start rattling off some questions to get this conversation going. So Josh, let's start with you. So how is and everybody can kind of jump in after Josh actually, but curious in order to kind of get this going, how has the growing youth mental health crisis that's happening nationwide impacted your organization's services, programs, and priorities?
As I mentioned earlier, we've got a couple different buckets. I'm sure a lot of you guys do too, of funding that we work with. And so one of those is HUD. And so we operate out of a housing first model a lot of times, which basically means that we've got to address that basic need for shelter and safety before we can address just about anything else. But I'd almost argue that mental health first may be the more appropriate strategy, or maybe it's both and or chicken and egg kind of situation. For a lot of our youth and young adults that we're serving, that need to address either undiagnosed mental illness or the experience that they're having in the moment of some expression of depression or anxiety is really paramount, and is kind of shading and coloring every other experience they're having, from housing instability to employment to education. And so we've had to really gear up our approach to addressing those mental health needs with our folks, which in our case has looked a few different ways. One of the things that we've done more and more over the last few years is prioritize co-locating partner services when possible. And so we invite our mental health professionals on site, both in formal MOUs and also informal partnerships with some smaller counseling groups who aren't able to come as often, but are wanting to be a part and to help when they can, welcoming them on site to connect with our folks in a space that our folks our youth are comfortable with, and where they feel safe, and where they've already got a little bit of sense of stability, so they can meet them, literally where they're at, and also figuratively where they're at. And then also prioritizing as we're moving forward and thinking about expanding services and continuing to prioritize the needs of the people that we see, looking to how we can hire even more clinicians in-house to meet that need. Aside from the partners that we're already bringing on site and having them to be a part of those services.
Thank you. Yeah, that brings up for me, Amy, I don't know if you'd remember this, we had a conversation, I don't know, a year ago maybe, where we were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And starting with the basics of food, shelter, et cetera, and how your viewpoint on that and what you've seen in your work of where folks will prioritize kind of the top of the pyramid over some of those basic needs. does that bring up anything for you, what Josh had mentioned in that context?
Yeah, it totally does. And yeah, I have a lot of opinions about Maslow's hierarchy of needs as it applies to adolescence. Turns out in 1942, when that was developed, there wasn't a lot of adolescent research and engagement going on. And our young people, particularly in our trafficking programs, they will sacrifice their safety, and basic needs in order to have a sense of love and belonging with people. And so it's not especially relevant all the time. But like Josh was saying, we have really prioritized sort of a model that combines clinical work with case management. And so have been able to, we wrote a grant 2 years ago where we were able to hire a clinician who delivers traditional therapeutic interventions, but in a really non-traditional way. And so goes to the youth, does a lot of literal windshield therapy, and it makes a big difference. And we're doing that in our transitional living program as well.
That's great to hear. Doug, can you speak to how this is impacting your services, programs, priorities over at Ignite?
Yeah, certainly. I feel like a lot of what I have to say is going to echo both what Josh and Amy just said. Very similar. We partner with community agencies to address mental health needs within our programs. But we've seen an increased need. Really, you could go back to the beginning of the pandemic and how everything changed. There also became that inconsistency with community partners to address mental health needs because everything went virtual here. And that virtual therapeutic setting wasn't working for our young adults. They needed that in person to really work together on. So Ignite was able to address this need by we did secure grant funding for a full-time clinician in our programs just recently. So we're hoping to, Amy, you just spoke to have that therapeutic need as well as the case management need both met while they're here from our on-site folks. So someone full-time that can meet that. I even wrote down the hierarchy of needs and putting mental health in there as well. So really incorporating all of that into the whole person that we're working with.
Thank you. What, Doug, I guess since we're still chatting, what would you say are the most significant challenges that your agency is facing as it relates to serving young people with mental health needs right now?
Yeah. So I don't know if the challenges are necessarily new, but they feel heightened recently. Seeing more like heightened aggressive or verbal altercations with behavior or symptoms that arise in our spaces. Really, the pandemic really increased these challenges where, like I said, those mental health services did go all virtual. And wait list times have increased, where I think it's, everybody is way more informed on mental health now. And it's less of a taboo topic in our society, but that need has increased significantly. So wait list times are a lot higher and our young people don't want to wait. So if they're able to meet with somebody right away, that is the best case scenario. And that's been a challenge. You might have those tough conversations with somebody who's resistant and they're willing to meet with the clinician for the first time alongside you. And then that person has a schedule conflict and suddenly all that work goes down the drain. So it's a tough battle back and forth.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Josh, we talked a little bit about this a couple of days ago. Can you share what's going on with your program, the biggest challenges that you're facing, and how you all are meeting those challenges with the new strategies and what young people are reporting to be most effective for them?
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what Doug said. We are also seeing, just the need versus the services available is completely incongruent. There's such a need, and it's not a knock to our mental health providers locally or our partners who are in it and doing their best. It's just there's a lot of folks, a lot of young adults and youth who are needing mental health services these days. And so a lot of times when we get our folks in for an appointment, it's typically about 3 months out. And sometimes we're able to advocate and say, hey, this is really a critical need. Can we try to bump this up a little bit? We just did that last week with a partner. And thankfully they were able to bump us up about a month and a half, which is great. But that's still a long time to wait for mental health services, especially when you're dealing with youth and young adults who tend to be a bit more transient. And like Doug said, they don't want to wait, which I understand. I think another thing that we see that I'm sure you all can probably relate with is a lot of our youth and young adults are deeply distrustful of anything remotely resembling a system or these systems that they've been a part of. And so building rapport and building trust is really critical and takes time and patience and, balancing that need to build rapport and to gain trust, with also recognizing that for some of our folks in particular who may have more, acute undiagnosed mental illness, there's a sense of urgency there. And so wanting to give space for that and to honor what they're experiencing and to approach everything from initial contact to intake with contact to intake with a trauma-informed lens can't be understated. But at the same time, like our folks, the sooner we can get them in, the better. And so I think those are two of the biggest ones. It's just we need more providers and having the time and the flexibility to really build relationships with our youth and young adults so that they feel comfortable enough to access the services that they need.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I want to pivot here just a little bit, being mindful of our time. Mental health is kind of a broad term, right? I think that a lot of people would relate to that broad bucket of it, but I want to be really specific about what we're talking about. It means different things in different kind of places and spaces. And so it could cover things like anxiety, depression, stress, more. Are there any specific mental health issues that are among youth that you all are seeing as more common, or are you seeing any differences in age groups, like as it relates to mental health, or differences coinciding with other issues that they're experiencing? Doug, I think you might have some good insight into this one, and then Amy, I want to hear from you too.
Yeah, sure. So mental health is a very broad term, right? Yeah. But I also see it as a byproduct of experiencing homelessness a lot. And then I talk a lot about trauma with our young adults. And trauma is something that needs to be addressed more with our young people. Over the past few years, with just talking specifically to Chicago, with students not being in schools, being virtual, not necessarily having a consistent go-to mentor or adult in their life, and their home lives not being stable. That trauma increased significantly, and we're seeing that now when they get to us, 3 years later. So unaddressed trauma, I think, is something that is very common and it needs to be worked on. That trauma can be in the home, in the community violence, substance use, homelessness in itself, and that cycle just continues. So hopefully we can be that breaker in that cycle.
For sure. Amy, when we talked the other day, Allison was talking about the prevalence of suicidality among the clients that you all are working with. Can you speak to that in the context of this broader question?
Yeah, I can, but I also want to echo what Doug was saying. So interesting, like we did not talk to each other before we sat on this, but turns out we all do the same thing, kind of. So, so for me, like you all have been saying, mental health is such a broad term. And if anybody on this call was part of the latest iteration of the DSM, I apologize, but I will say that there are so many factors that go into making a human being. And so biological factors and how they're raised. And, I work a lot with Native youth. They have generational trauma. And so to try to pinpoint what one thing is affecting our youth is almost impossible. And having them go to a clinician who needs to diagnose them with something, right? I know that there's a benefit to that, but I sort of hate it too, because it really makes it difficult for them to be able to look at themselves as a whole person, if that makes any kind of sense. And I do wish that all mental health providers and the people who answered the phone for them could meet with youth for a day to get a sense of what their waiting rooms should look like and how people should answer the phone and interact with them. Like, that would be fantastic. I always say that, like, when people come into our offices, they should be treated like the best guest at the fanciest restaurant in the world, right? Like, they should be treated like they are treasured guests. And if our young people went to a mental health clinic, particularly a free mental health clinic or one provided by the state or the county, and were treated that way, make a big difference in how they access mental health services. So that's my soapbox. I'll stand off of it now. But in terms of suicidal ideation, what we see is a lot of passive suicidal ideation. So not necessarily to the level where they would be admitted, but more so, it would just be great if I would fall asleep and not wake up, or the world would be better if I weren't in it. So much more passive, not to say we don't have some of the more active suicidal ideation. So thanks for listening to my rant.
No, that's super helpful. And I think it certainly resonates for us at NRS, and I'm sure that it resonates with a lot of folks on this call. I think, it's a good time to now pivot to kind of what do we do? Are there ways that we can work to prevent mental health from growing and or becoming worse in the populations that we work with? Josh, do you have any thoughts about what's working or where we can go from here?
Yes, I have a few thoughts. I will say, Amy, I'm going to join you on your soapbox for just a second, because I think what you shared about, in particular, not just providers, but the folks from the beginning who answer the phones, who greet at the door, I think really engaging our youth and young adults through a trauma-informed lens with the utmost respect. And I just don't think that can be overstated. I think that's really, really important. So I'll get off your soapbox. Thank you for letting me share it with you. I think, I was talking with Sam the other day, and my answer to this is frustrating to me because it seems obvious, but I think it's also so important. I think a big piece of it really does come down to education with early intervention and prevention work. And so I think us getting the word out, not just about mental health, but also what we're seeing in our service population, what our youth and young adults are experiencing, why they're experiencing those things, making sure that our community knows that that is a problem. I quote Maya Angelou a lot on this, that, when you know better, you do better. And a lot of our communities don't know that there's a problem. And so how are they going to be contributing towards solving and resolving that problem if they're not even aware it exists? And so I know, in addition to our everyday jobs and caring for our folks and supporting our teams and making sure the work gets done, continuing to be the squeaky wheel in our communities and to sound the alarms on mental health crises and housing crisis and how all these things intersect. It is not something we all have the capability of doing 24/7, 365, but it is critical because we've got to continue sounding the alarm bells on this, because it's not going anywhere. I'm sure we all could talk about the increase in numbers and services that we've seen over the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic. So the problem is not getting smaller, it's not leveling out, it's increasing. And we've got to continue to educate our community partners and our stakeholders in the community about the issues.
Thank you, Josh. Doug, do you have any thoughts on about where we're going or what we need to be doing?
Yeah, to take a bit of a spin on it, since we work in housing here at Ignite, we need more housing. We need more housing specific for young adults as well. Without that roof over your head and a safe place to sleep at night, nothing else happens. You know, that's a huge barrier. Like a shelter or a transitional home can help stabilize a young person and help build them a foundation, but we're not going to necessarily be able to treat long term, if you will. So we need available housing both for our young people as well as just society as a whole. Quite honestly, you know, it's a huge barrier to people. You know, thinking here in Chicago, market rate rent is enormous, and having an 18, 22-year-old try to get a market rate apartment is outstanding. Even sometimes for our staff members. So that increases heavily to our mental health crisis as well. If we can't meet our basic needs, where are we going?
Yeah. And Amy, is there anything that you wanted to add with this before we open things up for questions here?
Yeah, I'm going to end it with a really great quote, which is like, our job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, right? So we do both of those things. And sometimes it makes us, as my favorite FBI agent told me one time, a pain in the ass. but it's also, I'm super clear that I am speaking on behalf of people who don't have the forum to speak up. And so I'm okay with people calling me, you know what, in order to do that.
I think a lot of people on this call would resonate with that state of mind and that approach, and have been called a number of similar names.
Yeah. I was going to say, I really love that quote, Amy. We participated in a stakeholder event back in February that was focusing on youth homelessness in our area, in our county, which was great. Really thankful for the opportunity. And in the planning event, where we were talking about the structure of it and what we were going to articulate, there was a push for one person in particular that we really needed like a success story to end on a good and positive note. And I said, it's not my job to make somebody feel comfortable about youth homelessness. That's not what we're here for. So I love that quote. That's great.
It's clear that we all have like a lot of work to do. I appreciate you all coming here today and sharing your perspectives and what's going on within your organizations and where you hope to drive the support of youth forward. So we've got a couple of minutes here. I'm a little tardy. I apologize, everybody, but I want to get some questions in here. I didn't see any pop up in the chat. So if anybody has a question, now is your time. And you don't need to use the hand raise thing. You can just unmute yourself and jump in. A minute.
We were either super boring or totally brilliant. That's what I'm taking from this. No.
I'm gonna vote brilliant. I see a question in there actually that I might have missed or it just came in. Is anyone using a paraprofessional crisis response team?
No, and I would really like to hear more about that. Like, we have crisis response team, but they are the opposite of paraprofessional. They're like master's level social workers who, in my experience, are they adhere strongly to the modality that they are following. Is a strength-based way to say that. I'd really love to hear about a paraprofessional crisis response team.
Yeah, so I can't, this is like a username. So if this was your question, feel free to elaborate now. SCJHA. Or maybe they're not on anymore.
Can I add a question?
Sure.
Okay, so I would go with brilliant, Amy, by the way, which you shared, but one of the things that we've been talking a lot about with our 2021 data and that Sam had shared is just seeing this this younger age group, this ages 10 to 14, be one of the fastest growing populations reaching out to the Safe Line, and we're hearing this sort of across the board and working with other hotlines and in other types of service providers. Are you all seeing the same? And if so, was sort of within this context of just supportive systems and supportive services, but also how are you all maybe starting to have the conversation or addressing working with this younger population as well?
So I can answer that question. I'll say currently, the primary age range that we're seeing is not the younger population. However, in terms of our community-based youth services, our work geared towards that like 12 to 15, 12 to 16 age range is newer compared to our other services. And those newer services for younger youth launched in 2020. So it is entirely possible that we may be having a different conversation a year from now. So to speak to what we are doing to get the word out about that, to engage those folks, we launched in partnership with the National Safe Place Program, our Safe Place program back in August of 2020. And so we've got relationships with local convenience stores, with our local transit system, with the Y, that are Safe Place locations. So youth in our service range in 12 to 21 can go call the line, get connected to one of our staff 24/7, and then essentially we'll triage at that point. We'll bring them on site, try to stabilize, figure out what the next steps are. And then we've gotten a lot more involved in our local school systems too, aside from where we already were with the foster care system. So we're connected really well with our social workers, with our McKinney-Vento liaisons, with our parenting and pregnant teen social workers, our trauma-informed folks. And so all that to say, currently, we are seeing more of the 15, 16 and up, but in the near future, because our program is younger for the younger population, that may change in the near future.
Thanks,
I think
Josh.
I would add that I'm with Josh in that we are not serving that population, but our community folks are serving that population. They see it. So if there's a youth younger than 12 who is experiencing those issues, they see it absolutely as a mental health crisis, and they are much more likely to intervene with younger people than they are to intervene with a 17-year-old who they tend to see perhaps as somebody who has behavioral issues.
Hello.
Hi.
How's everyone? So my name is James from Safe Inc. I'm an outreach worker. I'm physically out into the streets, initiating the contacts with youth, not just youth. My position is unique. I'm encountering contacts with individuals of all ages. So a question to the panel is, I heard Doug say, it's tough building that rapport and that trust. I also heard Josh mention a few things as well. So my question to the panel is, what techniques do you guys have in place? To bridge that gap, to break that barrier where you can, where you build a rapport with the clients in the street, because as we all know, they lack trust, and for good reason. So unless we cross that barrier, break through that barrier, that's the only way we're going to be successful in, getting them to trust us enough to come in, to our facilities, or, call us for help. So what techniques do you guys use as far as trying to break that barrier?
I swear a lot. And like not at them, that would be bad. But I find that just being your authentic self, right? Like can be the best Amy as I am not going to be you, right? And I can't pretend to be you. But if I just bring my authentic self to it and not be dependent on some weird professional demeanor, I think it just makes a huge difference. I will say I work on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation, and I believe and I know that I do good work and have been accepted there. And I think it's because I'm just me and I don't try to be too professional. I mean, I am professional and I'm licensed, but I think, do you know what I'm saying? And I don't swear at the Native American elders because that would be very disrespectful. So.
I agree.
Go ahead, Josh.
Sorry, Amy, I think you and I would be good friends. I really appreciate that answer. I think in addition to that, also consistency is so important, right? For some of the folks that we've seen since we opened this program for the older transition age youth experiencing homelessness, sometimes it's taken 6 months to a year for us to just gain enough trust and confidence in a young adult for them to start to tell us their story. It takes time, and also not just consistency, but consistently being a welcoming, non-judgmental presence in their life, right? Like being really mindful of our facial expressions and our body language when we're listening to the stories that they're telling us, and not responding when they tell us about some awful thing that happened to them, but remaining engaged and remaining like actively listening and affirming that what they're telling us is, we're thankful that they're opening up to us. And so I think that consistency and that non-judgment is really critical, and meeting them where they're at. We also will provide with our community partner providers, we provide prophylactics and Narcan, fentanyl test strips, like whatever we can to make sure that wherever they're at, whatever they're experiencing, we're there with them in it to meet that need, not judgmentally, in hopes that eventually we can gain their trust, but it does take time. So I hear the struggle.
Yeah, I echo everything Josh and Amy said. But with our outreach folks, we have staff members who have lived experience. So they're out there on the streets talking to our young people as well, building that rapport, being that first person that they speak to at Ignite before they get to our housing programs. As well as we have a peer mentor program as well. So someone who's currently in our programs, a peer who also participates in that outreach efforts.
Does that answer your question? Is it James? Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And thank you.
Do you have ideas for us? Like something we might be missing?
Well, the experience is the best teacher. And I'm hearing a lot of good things, also, techniques that I use. Sometimes it takes me weeks or some months, to break through that barrier. And patience. We have to be patient, very, very patient. One of the things that I'm witnessing is the mental health aspect. And Sam talked about it. It's a broad term, right? But anxiety, depression, is very, very high on that list. And, unless we can identify with that and not treat the behavior when we see that, physical wise, then I think we can make some sort of leeway, but it's tough. I really appreciate this panel. I think you guys covered sort of everything, the obstacles that we're facing and the hurdles that we have to get over with dealing with the population of people that we serve. And, we have to be passionate because this is an emotional roller coaster. I just had a young man call me after 2 years, being on the street. He told me, he said, "I'm gonna call you when I'm ready, big bro."
Yeah.
He called me 2 months ago. No, about almost 2 months ago, he called me. He said, "Big bro, I'm tired of these streets. Come get me." I went and got him. And now just last week, we got him in the Job Corps. So it's like, it's an emotional roller coaster. And I'm always looking for ideas and tips because like I said, I'm definitely out in the street. I pretty much, Safe Think and the board of directors have gave me, the opportunity to move at my discretion. My vision, like, See how huge this office is? Yeah, so I created a drop-in center for youth to come here, you know, after school, you know, try and get them off the streets, something positive. And, you know, the more positive things that we can get to them, and I'm hearing positive things from this panel here, you know, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys as well, because we need everybody aboard for this here. I'm gonna call it a journey.
For sure. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing, James.
Yeah, thank you.
We're a little late here, so I want to make sure that we wrap up now. If there's any lingering questions, we can jump in maybe one more. If not, you can feel free to reach out to me. I can drop my information in the chat, and we can pass that along to the panelists. If I don't see anyone jumping for a question, I'm going to go ahead and close it out then and say thank you all so much for coming. It's clear that we have a lot of work to do. And this work is an art, right? We have to balance the needs of the young people that we're working with and the systems that we are working within, and also try to make those incremental changes to make it better. And being part of conversations like this, talking about the issues that we're dealing with, solidarity around the struggles, is all part of that process. So I really appreciate you all, and thank you for your time today. And thanks to our awesome panelists, Amy, Doug, Josh. Really appreciate you. Thanks, everybody.